Have you ever considered why a simple question like, "Who am I?" can be so difficult to answer? While there are many ways to interpret this question, the one thing we can be guaranteed is that every one of us will have a uniquely different answer to it. Despite us having a lot in common with our fellow human beings, like race, religion, or sexual orientation, there is one thing that makes each of us uniquely different: our personality, the very essence of who we are. Our personalities are very complex. Some people may be slightly similar in some ways, but no two will be exactly the same. Hi, I'm Michelle, a life coach at Skillworks Africa, and in this session I'll help you understand what personality is, explore the different ways our personalities can be classified, and how those classifications have evolved. I'll then explain the Townsend Personality Questionnaire, one of the most universal personality inventories in modern psychology. So today, I'll describe the way the Townsend Personality Questionnaire, also referred to as the TPQ, narrows down an almost infinite list of personality traits to the most important ones that are present in all people. Unlike most personality assessments that are based on theories of personality that have resulted from one particular psychologist's theory or opinion about human nature, the TPQ is based on the understanding that 5 main factors are necessary and sufficient for broadly describing human personality. This is the most modern and collectively agreed on theory by those who specifically study personality. This personality measure was developed by Dr. Gary Townsend of Skillworks Africa in 2005 as a refinement to the original Ocean version of the Big Five. Apart from reframing the original 5 dimensions and their related facets in a more behaviorally accurate way, the 120-item instrument was developed and validated using the RASH approach, a probabilistic mathematical model that has been determined to be the only method able to transform raw data from the human sciences into abstract equal interval scales, and consequently, produce reliable people assessments. But more of that at another time. In this video, I'm going to explain the 5 major Big Five traits, which we refer to as dimensions in the TPQ, as well as the sub-traits, also called facets. But first, let's just take a few minutes to understand the underlying fundamentals involved in measuring personality using the Big Five. The TPQ is a shift from the old bimodal distribution type, 4-dimensional models, like the MBTI, to a distinctly different and more scientifically appropriate model that involves 5 dimensions of personality. A normal distribution of scores on these dimensions. An emphasis on individual personality traits as opposed to type. Preferences for behaviors indicated by a strength of score, and most importantly, a model based on experience, not theory. It is this experience-based model that is used in personal development areas like self-understanding, interpersonal interaction, management, workplace dynamics, and leadership ability. In terms of its validity, the 5-factor scales are reinforced by the results published in over 2,000 articles, chapters, and books that have been correlated in meaningful ways with scales from the most published personality measures. In addition, the Big Five measures have proven very useful in predicting a range of personal, work, and clinical behaviors like vocational interests, patterns of feelings, attachment styles, and personality disorders. Now let's take a closer look at the integrated way in which the TPQ measure is applied in practice. Because the TPQ is not a theory of personality, but a model based on experience, it does not prescribe interdimensional or facet relationships in a hard and fast manner. Rather, it allows you to use experience-based research to identify specific personality styles, based on observations in practice. In this way, using the TPQ to study personality profiles of high and low performers within a specific job allows for the creation of a custom norm that can be used for comparisons and analysis. For example, studies have shown that for sales jobs, extroversion and sociability dimensions are highly predictive of performance, while for blue-collar workers, it appears that conscientiousness and sociability are the dimensions that show a positive relationship to job performance. Given this complexity and potential, throughout most of the 20th century, personality psychologists have debated the question of personality structure, pondering questions like: what are the enduring individual differences that allow us to describe the distinctive features of a person, and how are they organized? Should we measure needs, or traits, or temperaments, or character, and just how different am I? So, after decades of trying to reconcile these alternative models, it became increasingly clear in the 1980s that 5 factors were necessary and more or less sufficient to encompass the trait descriptive terms in natural languages. Although alternative models are still sometimes proposed, it is fair to say that the 5-factor model is the most scientifically rigorous classification that behavioral science has. That being said, let's have a quick look at where this model all started. Since their inception in 1978, the NEO inventories have been designed to assess the most important general personality traits and the factors they define. At first, only 3 major personality factors, neuroticism, extroversion, and openness to experience, whence the name NEO. In the 1980s, further work with the natural language of personality traits led to the confirmation that 5 factors were needed and sufficient to form a comprehensive model. When first published, the NEO personality inventory consisted of 180 items, with 6 facet scales for each of the neuroticism, extroversion, and openness to experience domains, and brief global scales to measure agreeableness and conscientiousness. 4 years later, Costa and McRae introduced the short version, the NEO-FFI, as well as new norms appropriate for use with college-age and adult respondents. Then, in 1992, the NEO-PIR appeared with new facet scales for agreeableness and conscientiousness, and the replacement of 10 of the original NE and O items. 2 years later, translations were made into over 40 languages. In 2005, Dr. Gary Townsend revisited the traditional Big Five in 2 fundamental ways. Firstly, he renamed the Big Five dimensions agreeableness as sociability, and neuroticism as constancy, and openness to experience as originality, and defined each facet with distinctive anchors representing less of and more of the underlying items, with a clear focus on terminology and descriptors that would be more appropriate for both clinical and work contexts. Secondly, he developed the 5 individual measures that comprise the Big Five model using the probabilistic Rasch model, the only current method able to transform raw data from the human sciences into abstract equal interval scales, and in turn, develop behavioral measures. Like all the earlier inventories, the TPQ inventory assesses the 5 factors. Because these broad constructs summarize so much information, they are the logical starting place for assessing one's personality. When interacting in social situations, they explain whether you are persistently predisposed to being energetic and thrill-seeking versus sober and solitary. How when you interact with others, whether you do so in a kind and trusting way versus being competitive and arrogant. Whether when interacting with or experiencing others, you respond in an emotionally distressed versus emotionally stable way. If, in the pursuit of your goals and work, you are disciplined and fastidious, as opposed to laid back and careless. And as you experience the world around you, do you do so in a curious and unconventional way, versus taking a traditional and pragmatic approach to life? These are some of the important characteristics of the 5 factors. As I'll highlight a bit later, these factors are behavioral dimensions and not types, so people will vary continuously on them, with most people falling between the extremes. In addition, these factors tend to stay stable over a 45-year period, beginning in young adulthood. Let's now look at how this all relates to the idea of personality styles.